Having been the victim of government overreach and a weaponized system of justice and law enforcement, I know what it feels like to have the full weight of the United States government barreling down on you. And as the Biden Inspector General determined, those activities by the FBI and DOJ were wholly improper and not predicated upon law and facts. I will ensure, if confirmed, that no American is subjected to that kind of torment, to that kind of cost, financially and personally. And most importantly, I will make sure that no American is subjected to death threats like I was, and subjected to moving their residences like I was, because of government overreach, because of leaks of information about my personal status. If confirmed as FBI director, Mr. Chairman, you have my commitment that no one in this country will feel that pain.
Gosh, I'm excited because he seems angry, and I want a bunch of FBI people going to prison. Joining me now, Benjamin Weingarten, editor-at-large for Real Clear Investigations. Okay, Ben, what can we expect? I obviously am as familiar with Kash as anyone who does what we do, but I've never met the man. We're not friends. What kind of guy is this?
Well, I think from everything that we know in his career, in what he's said in podcasts and TV interviews and beyond, this is someone who has worked in all of the core agencies of the national security, intelligence, and law enforcement apparatus. He has investigated the investigators. He has paid a dear price, as he just laid out there, for having exposed rot, corruption, politicization, and weaponization within the deep state. He was never captured by those entities, and then he was targeted by them himself. With the DOJ, while he was investigating the DOJ's own misconduct, to put it lightly, with respect to all things Trump-Russia collusion, he was having his records surveilled, his communications surveilled under subpoena for years. So this is someone who's worked in the belly of the beast. He has exposed its corruption, and he has been targeted by it himself. And who better to be put in the position of FBI director, which has been the tip of the spear in politicization and weaponization of the national security and intelligence apparatus, than Kash Patel.
Ben, can you do me a favor and lay out that case in a little more detail for those who forget it? Because obviously inside baseball nerds like you and I understand the story, but who did that to Kash? How did that happen? Lay that out for people who forget.
Well, you have to go back a little bit in time to those not so heady days of late 2016, 2017, when you had the House Intelligence Committee, then led by Devin Nunes, who himself faced the wrath of the uniparty in the deep state. And he was working through top investigators, namely including Kash Patel, to blow the lid off the Trump-Russia collusion hoax. And Patel played an integral role at the start in exposing the weaponization and violations of civil liberties by the government in pursuit of Trump via the fraud foisted on the secret surveillance intelligence FISA court, whereby the government was spying on a foreign policy advisor, Carter Page, under the guise of the idea that he was somehow corrupted by the Russians, tied to the Russians, and using the surveillance on Carter Page as a window into surveilling on Trump world writ large. And what Kash Patel exposed was that they being the DOJ, FBI, and others, foisted a fraud on the FISA court because there was no there in the justification for surveilling, for spying on an American citizen and violating his liberties in Carter Page. While Devin Nunes' committee and Kash Patel as lead investigator was working to blow the lid off the corruption, which exposed that from the start, Russian collusion was a total hoax and a fraud and a way to sabotage and subvert Trump's presidency, he faced threats from the Justice Department that he was investigating, reportedly, that they might go about subpoenaing his communications records, according to reports. But little did he know that when that threat was made, before the so-called Devin Nunes memo came out on the Carter Page FISA court fraud at the start of exposing all of Russiagate. The DOJ already had subpoenaed Kash Patel's communications and the communications of a whole slew of staffers on the House Intelligence Committee, on the Senate Judiciary Committee, on the Senate Intelligence Committee, and beyond, all of whom were looking into the DOJ's activities with respect to Trump-Russia collusion. And Kash Patel would spend many years essentially going through exposing all of it. When he later served as a deputy to the director of national intelligence, Rick Grenell at the time, he worked to expose by declassifying many of the Russiagate documents to bring to light to the American people the corruption there. But so this is someone who is at the heart of exposing maybe the greatest conspiracy in the history of the country to sabotage and subvert a president, treat him as a traitor to Russia. And as a consequence for it, one consequence was the government that he was investigating was spying on him at the same time. And of course, there are many leaks in which Patel was maligned in the media. And as he noted, of course, he had to move as a consequence of personal information exposed about him. So he's paid a dear price for daring to stare down the deep state. And so again, I'd ask, who better to serve in a place in the FBI that has been at the tip of the spear of politicization and weaponization than someone like him who has confronted it head on and has the scars to prove it?
Ben, you wrote a wonderful piece for The Federalist about, the whistleblowers, about the corruption inside the FBI. Just how bad is it? Because I brought up in the opening just a few minutes ago, Kash has a mountain to climb. Now, he appears to be the guy who can climb it, but this is no easy task to clean out an evil secret state police agency like this.
This is an incredibly difficult task, in no small part because the deep state is probably the hardest nut to crack in the entirety of the administrative state because of the awesome powers that it has, the way it can sabotage and subvert people and leak, and because of potentially the corruption that's been there, and the way that bureaucracies are resistant to radical change to begin with, before you get to the fact that this is has the awesome powers of a security state that we're talking about. So in that piece, I talked about how there's been this backlash to the Trump administration forcing out, in the case of the FBI, 8 top officials there, many of whom were promoted to these very high-level positions, running different branches or running significant offices like the Miami field office or the Washington, D.C. field office, many of them promoted under outgoing FBI director Christopher Wray. And the backlash has been, how can you fire these very senior officials within the FBI? And the Trump administration's justification, without going person by person through the individuals forced out, is that they were part of the weaponization and hyper-politicization of the FBI. And what I honed in on in this piece is how at least 3 of the 8 officials there weaponized the security clearance process to sideline whistleblowers who made disclosures, some to their supervisors, their superiors in the FBI, and then others to Congress and beyond, of the weaponization and hyper-politicization in the FBI. And what these people were subjected to was mind-boggling to any fair-minded American. So you had people calling out the FBI abusing its powers or targeting people on political grounds, for example, for opposing the vaccine mandates, let's say internally. And they would try and dredge up, sometimes based on their political beliefs, a predicate to call into question whether many of these officials, FBI officials, some of them with stellar records, should have their security clearances potentially pulled. And when this happens, when you have a probe into your security clearance as an FBI official, you're put on suspension, you're not allowed to work, you're not allowed to earn income, you're not allowed to seek out third-party employment or receive gifts to get by. So basically, the process is punishment while they're going through probing your background to figure out whether or not you should have your security clearance revoked or not. This process can go on for months. Then you get a decision, revocation or not. Then you can appeal that decision if you're revoked. And you might be waiting months more just to get the file from your investigators telling you why you had your security clearance revoked, that you can then respond to within 30 days and try and defend yourself and get a final judgment on it. Many people in the FBI themselves leave before you ever get your case adjudicated, before you ever appeal it, essentially, because the process destroys you professionally, it destroys you personally. So I profile some of these people who had their security clearances targeted, and then to boot, others in the offices who blew the whistle on them being targeted for their political views, who themselves face the retaliation of having their security clearances weaponized against them by having them suspended, investigated, and beyond. So I would say that based on that alone, the fact that 3 of 8 very high-level officials within the FBI were allegedly involved with weaponizing the security clearance processes, oftentimes against conservatives or people who refused the COVID mandate, vaccine mandate, I think that alone tells you what the rot and corruption is like. And that's before we get to, of course, the targeting of faithful Catholics as if they're somehow domestic terrorists, the January 6th Inquisition, the targeting of concerned parents against the indoctrination of their kids in racial Marxism by the FBI, and on and on. We can talk about all these examples of a bureau that, to your point, was basically used as state police, as secret police, and sicked on those who dared to dissent from regime orthodoxy. Kash Patel has a huge, tall task to try and reverse all that. The long knives are no doubt going to be out for him. But again, I'd say you trust someone who's been targeted by a deep state like that more than you would trust anyone else because he hasn't been captured by these entities, yet he's worked alongside them, he's worked with them, and he's investigated them. It's no doubt a tall task, but he's someone who has the intestinal fortitude, I think, to take it on better than almost anyone trying to take on that kind of behemoth.
I feel better now. Thanks, Ben. I owe you for that. I feel better now. I just breathed a sigh of relief. I feel good. Thank you, brother. Come back soon. I would thank you for coming to my YouTube channel, but I know how brilliant it is, and I know you love it here. So subscribe and watch. We're going to start really ramping things up and putting some funny stuff, some interesting stuff out there, some collaborations. Either way, my YouTube channel is officially the place to be. So stick around.